Welcome to the Future of Work podcast. Today's guest is Sarah Davis, who is the Director of Strategy at Pophouse, a full scope design studio focused on the built environment. Sarah has over 70 years of experience working in business intelligence and designed extensive research and marketing strategies, has been instrumental in developing the strategy that informs and designs many of Pophouse's projects. Prior to joining Pophouse in 2018, Sarah was the Director of Business Intelligence at Rocket Mortgage, Quicken Loans, where she began her career as a data analyst. Sarah earned her bachelor's degree in political science at the University of Michigan. So, welcome, Sarah. We're really happy to have you on and know that you've not only done some exciting projects in your career, but you've done some very, very interesting research. And that research, I think, is honestly the outcome of that research is will be the most interesting to our particular audience today.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for having me today.
Well, you talk about the built environment and designing for human-centered and data-driven design.
Yeah.
What does that really mean? What does that really mean?
Yeah. So it's been an evolution for us over the course of the last 4 years that I've been part of the Pop House team. And when we started it, we weren't quite sure what it meant for us either. So we started off gathering survey information, and that was really the core of what I was doing. And it really has been an evolution over those 4 years to understand the impact that we could make by really layering in these, as you mentioned, data driven insights and thinking about those in the scope of our design work. And so as we start a project, we're really thinking about that human centered experience, which I think now more than ever is so important, which I think has been part of the evolution of my role and the work that we do at Pop House. Bringing in the idea of what is a human's experience when they're in any physical environment. And as you mentioned, as you were giving a synopsis of an overview of our company, we're a company that really focuses on strategic, human-centric, and unconventional design. And the idea for us is that, and we know from the research, that any physical environment has an impact on an individual at any particular point of time. We want to make sure that that's a positive impact. So by doing the research and integrating these layers of thought into our design, we can actually bring more thoughtful, intentional, purposeful design into the built environment, which will then have a positive impact on people. Our niche happens to be workplace. So we focus a lot on workplace and the office and what we can do within that built environment, what we can layer into the design to make sure that when people are in the space, they're as engaged as they can be, they're as productive as they can be, they want to be where they want to be, they want to come into the office and they really see it as a place that helps accelerate business outcomes. And it's really great for their wellness as well. So there's a lot of layers and thought that we give into how we can manifest that thought leadership into our design process.
Well, you just covered about nine topics all in one there.
Start
So
big.
I'm going to back you up a little bit. Uh, um, right now in the world of work,
Mhm.
um, we have kind of the workforce is divided into two different activities or two different types. We have people that are working in the office and then people that are working remotely.
Right.
And then what everybody's calling a hybrid, which don't think is the greatest term, but people that are working in both environments back and
Yeah.
forth. How do you how do you connect those environments rather than say, oh, the office environment is perfectly built based on all this research, blah 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 blah, wellness, wonderfulness, energy. Oh, but they're only there one day a week. And
Right.
what about the rest of the work time that they're on their own, so to speak? Do you think of? I know remote work is both a positive and negative connotation.
Mhm.
Um, gosh, I'm working independently and remotely. Gosh, you're very remote from me.
Right.
It can have both positive and negative connotations. We think of it more as a distributed work structure than a remote work structure so that it can be part of a singular whole. How does that relate to your design work? I just asked you 7 questions.
That's okay. We'll go big. No, I think you bring up some really great points. And I think that, when people are all in the office, when people are all remote, it's a little bit easier than that in between, which is what you described as distributed or hybrid, where people are moving between environments. And we have just recently really been digging into this, and we had conducted a survey because we really wanted to think about, work uninterrupted. Because as you mentioned, as people are moving from one environment to the next, are we having some tension as we change gears, right, from one place to the next? And we don't want that to be the case. We don't want people to lose momentum as they go through these different environments. So there's ways that home environments or remote environments can be optimized, and our company has looked at those so that people can really be the best when they're in a remote environment. And like you said, there's a place for remote work. However, when they're in the office, how can we also optimize that environment? And then how can we make the transition in between both as seamless as possible? Technology really fills in the gap there. And a lot of our clients are looking to how can we bolster technology? How can we think about acoustics in our spaces in a new way? I think that's been the hottest topic that has continued to rise with our clients and their concerns, because now, as opposed to before the pandemic, people are coming in, and what is often the case is there are a lot of Zoom calls, there's a lot of video calls that are happening. How can we think about acoustics, not only for the people that are in the office, but for the people that are on that other end, right? How can they hear the people who they're speaking with who are on site as well, and make sure that that's productive and functional for everybody?
Well, you mentioned technology, and the maybe that's the bridge between those two work modes. And we are all familiar with the ubiquitous Zoom now.
Yes, we are.
Every variation thereof. Two things, and maybe you can apply the thought process here. First, on a personal level and on a business level in our organization, we don't believe there's such a thing as an occupier anymore. We don't believe offices are occupied anymore by anybody. We believe that all of us are merely travelers. Merely travelers going between different modes of work, right, different types of facilities, all of which allow us to accomplish our daily goals. So again, beyond Zoom, and thinking of the workplace as being a place full of travelers, right, each in different modes of travel. What kind of technologies have you seen beyond the Zoom that are helping companies today to manage this? Are you seeing augmented and virtual reality starting to work its way into the offices? Are you seeing just organizational structures that help people log in and find their desk, going to the hot desk of 1980, 96, 97, the Deloitte days? What are you seeing in technology?
Our clients are trying out many different things. And I think you're hitting on such an important topic, because when people come into an office and they have to fiddle with the equipment, I read a statistic that fiddling, if you have to set something up and it takes the first 10 minutes of your meeting time, over the course of a year, that can equate to a few weeks worth of lost productivity. So we think about it a few minutes at a time.
Frustration.
Yeah. But it really is something that in aggregate can make a huge dent. And so we want to eliminate that. And I think in today's day and age too, the expectation is that we have more of a push button type solution. So there's a lot of different technology solutions that are in the market. I think part of it is the right solution for your company. However, it also has to be coupled with the design of the space that accommodates and supports that particular technology solution to function at its best. So if you have a Zoom meeting or Teams or whatever your platform is, but you're not in a space that allows that to be acoustically, contained, where people can hear. The other thing is writing on a whiteboard. If someone's still writing on a whiteboard and the people who are the participants on the call can't see that, they're not having that full experience. And we really want to think about what people's experience is in a workspace, whether, again, they're, like you were saying, they're travelers, whether they're in a remote setting or whether they're on site, really optimizing that for everybody.
in the physical environment, regardless of whether it's remote or back in the office,
Hmm.
um, what personal impact does that have on individuals? What is you're sitting in a very nice officing environment. I'm sitting in
Hmm.
my own personal office, and um, you can see you're in a public office. I'm in a personal
Right.
office, so you can see I like to be surrounded by my stuff.
Hmm.
You can look at my office and say, "Hey, I bet Frank's a sailor. I bet he's a serious Rangers sailor, maybe." Okay. So I like to be surrounded by my stuff, whether I'm at my corporate office or at my personal office.
Hmm.
How do you manage that when people are travelers moving from one environment to another to maintain the same comfort level
Right.
that people need in order to be productive? Because none of us can be as productive if we're anxious about something or not, just not in our zone, our comfort zone where we can relax
Right.
and focus.
Agreed. Yeah. When people feel like they don't belong in a space, right? They don't have that identity and
An
connection to
airport
the
would be the
space.
perfect example of that. Working in an open airport area, it's awful.
Right.
Uh,
It's more out of necessity. So we, as I had mentioned, had just conducted a nationwide survey, and just to set up what we're going to talk about, one of the questions that we asked was the look of the space where I work says something about who I am as a working professional, and 63% of people agreed with that statement. Right. So the look of that space, the aesthetic of the space, we weren't asking if it was remote or if it was an office space. We were just asking the look of the space, and overwhelmingly people agreed that the look of the space mattered, and it was a reflection of them as a working professional. So I agree with you that, thinking about what does that office look like and how can we bring culture and team into these spaces, potentially in ways that we weren't looking at before because we weren't maybe as concerned about that in the past. But like you said, we're travelers, so we're not always going to be on site full time anymore. But when I come into that space, I want to feel that sense of belonging and connection, just like I did when I was there full time, right? So I think it's really for the organization to think potentially of different ways that they can incorporate that for people, because the ability for people to connect with their environment is really central to them feeling productive. And then, like you said, having that sense of comfort and then doing their best at the work that they're doing.
well, what would be some specific examples of create things that create those comfort levels amongst all people? Because I
Mhm.
like things maybe different than you do, and maybe you like them different than some of your other colleagues. You might be comfortable in a crisp contemporary environment, and I might
Mhm.
like kind of an old cluttered environment. How do you blend those things so that you can do it? And we talk a lot about corporate culture and the impact of culture on design and the impact of design on culture. We talk
Yeah.
about those things, but when we go home from the office, we're not all the same culture no matter what.
Right.
Okay, so the things we bring to the office when we arrive, we bring a little bit of our home to the
Hmm.
office in our brains overall. So how do those? I know I'm sandbagging you on some of these questions, but
No, it's okay.
done I think is really important in this regard.
No, absolutely. I agree with you. And, we do surveys and we ask people their opinion on things. And just like you alluded to, when you ask people what color the walls should be, you'll get every color in the rainbow, right? Nobody is going to agree on the color or the, materiality or the palette or anything like that. So I think that it is something that's where we go a lot to the research, because it is one type of foundational way of using a benchmark to think about the environment and think about how we can integrate layers that people may not be able to put their finger on why this space feels good to me, but it just feels good, that type of idea. And there's a lot of thought in the realm of neuroaesthetics and cognitive functioning about how we can put conditions into a space that will help people be their best. So, for instance, there's research around the idea of curved walls, right? Not something that someone might be able to pull or point to or say, I really like that It's probably not in a lot of people's, general conversation, but the inclusion of curved walls actually increases cognitive functioning, right? The ceiling height in a particular room can impact the ability for us to be creative. So there's different layers and levers that we can pull on and think about. And really increasing, that variety of space, I think, is the other answer to it. So it's a mixture for us of thinking about and leaning on the research, but then also more than ever, again, I'll go back to the idea that before, office was a little bit bland, right? It was a little bit more vanilla, where we had the workstations, private office, and conference rooms, and it kind of ended there. And now what we see a lot of clients leaning into is more variety of space. So to the point you were making, Frank, they're able to find a place to fit the type of work they're doing. And if they need to go into a one-person focus room, there's the option to do that. If that's the way that they're learning best and working best, that's an option for them, right? A lot of collaborative zones and things of that nature. So people can gather in different ways, whether it's a traditional meeting where we're sitting around and someone's presenting to us around a table, or if it's a room that, like I'm in right now, where it's more open, casual seating options, amenity space, where people can ideate together, think, they can pick different postures, right? So they have more choice, more autonomy in that environment. And I think those types of elements really being introduced into the environment help what you're describing, which is how do I feel like I belong? How do I feel comfortable in this environment?
I think it's critically important, and it's funny. We built our own buildings for our own project years ago, and the architect that we used was a very, very well-known contemporary architect and on a global basis, and he said, "Well, we're going to use the highest quality materials to design space that will offend the least number of people possible for the
Okay.
longest period of time, and we're going to fill it with plants."
Mm,
That was simple. That was the whole theory, and we built like 42 buildings like that. And
right.
what we found is that no one ever came into one of our buildings and said, "Oh, I remember when that used to be cute, or
Mm,
that used to be nice,"
hmm.
uh, because the buildings became very timeless
Right.
uh,
Right.
overall. And I don't know whether they were more or less productive than any
Hmm.
other. Um, but that theory of making sure that no matter what, you weren't trying to design to impress, you were trying to ensure that your designs didn't make someone uncomfortable.
Right.
And so that, I think, was a very good philosophy. And then to fill it with green, which today we'd be talking about sustainability and
Yes.
biophilia,
Biophilia. Hmm.
those things. But back then it was just plants
Right.
when we were doing this. So how do those issues that I've just brought up, and how do biophilics, how do sustainables, what role do those play in the comfort, not in the goodness or badness of the design, but in the comfort of design that people feel? How do you translate sustainables to a feeling that matches a culture, aside from knowing that you used recycled plants or recycled bottles to create your carpet? That's a nice thing to say, but how does it make you feel better?
Yeah. I think in today's world, there's so much more value placed on that than ever before. I think there's more options in the marketplace as well to meet that demand, which is great to see. I think it's something that as organizations think about their workspace, they can really start to dial into those types of layers, whether it be biophilia, whether it be sustainable materiality and design, because of the people that work in that particular organization, right? And a lot of the clients that we're talking to are looking at their office space as a tool to attract and retain great talent.
Hmm.
And, people can decide with their feet whether or not they want to continue to work in an organization for a variety of factors. But if your office space is not up to snuff and that's something that's really important to the people that work at your organization, I think that that's definitely something that you should consider and look at. And also there is a lot of research specifically around biophilia about how it actually helps people work better, feel better, have a higher level of wellness, to be in places where there's natural light. That's incredibly important. To have the organic, natural materials around them is important. And then to your point, plants specifically as well. So all of those things can come together and create a very healthy environment for people to live, work, and play in.
No, I think that's really, really right. And thank goodness we've moved beyond ping pong tables and things of that.
Yes.
It's funny. Oh, just a short while ago, design was very much of large companies and all companies in many respects. The space was designed to impress their customers and their clients. Today, as you point out rightly, it's really designed to create a productive environment for their own teams, for their talent, call it, and to attract and sustain that talent, and then let the talent impress the clients. But there has been a major shift on that, and I think as we look at remote um, and the way space is used, the office we go to in the future won't be used as a place to work. It will be used as a place to create and meet, and that we will spend the rest of the time traveling to our customers or clients' offices, working remotely from anywhere,
Right.
uh, everywhere, overall. And what we used to call digital nomads, which were old ex-hippies like me that grabbed a guitar and a surfboard and a computer and went. We're going to be thinking of people that move maybe 6 months at a time to live and experience in different cultures, but remotely from their company, and come back for a while, then maybe come out just are a local nomad. We call them nomads.
Mm-hmm.
A local traveler. Maybe they work at their home, at their office, at the coffee shop, at the gym, at their private club, wherever they're
Right.
working around, at their clients' office spaces. So all these things mixed together is what we're seeing.
Mm-hmm.
I guess the culture of sort of always being part of something, you could look at different cultures and you can say, well, I know I live in this country or that country, but I am X. I come from the X tribe.
Mm-hmm.
Culture that I try to keep alive is my tribal culture. And in many respects, I think that that's where we're going from a work culture point of view. The tribe is based here, and that's where we came from, and our values are X and Y. But where we live and where we work doesn't matter. It's the values.
Mm-hmm.
So back to design, back to all of your neuro design research, et cetera. How do you manage that extension? I might be working in Germany for 3 years. How do I sustain my culture of my tribe, which might be in, heaven forbid, New York, but New York or Silicon Valley or somewhere else, in an entirely different environment? How do you, is there any way for design, any way for your built environment to match those two things up, or you say, no, that doesn't work. We do that a different way. And I know I'm crossing over from design to culture,
Right.
but that's what you're designing for.
Mm-hmm.
And you guys are famous for that, and have done one of the most impressive jobs of that anywhere in the world. So we expect a darn good answer.
No pressure. No, when you were starting to talk, I think that you make a great point, and so much of our clients are figuring out what that is right now, which is how does the office place unite our team, right? And I think that we've gone through this experiment over the last couple of years, and to be glass half full about it as much as we can. What can we take from it that will help us be better in the future? And to the point that you're making, a lot of what you're asking may be up to the organization itself, what type of culture they have, how people integrate with one another, how they connect. And some of that may be ingrained in the roles and responsibilities of that particular culture of that organization. However, there could be ways that design can help the type of work that they're doing be better. And if we can use the environment to bring people together, even if that person may come on site once a quarter, right? They may not be in the office all the time. So when they are in the office, how can we make sure that this space is set up to completely be supportive of this group of people, so that they can not only potentially work very successfully, but they also can socialize and they can gather and they can start to network in really effective ways, because we know that the work environment, right, when you put people together, they're going to run into each other. There's going to be those casual collisions. There's going to be that organic conversation that starts to come out, that starts to thread things together, whether it's people, whether it's the work itself, the process, but it's going to unite people, and that's going to be really strong for culture. And I think, as a lot of companies that we're talking to have been saying, we've hired a lot of people in the last couple of years. There's been people that we've never met, right, in person before. And how can we use this office space now to bring people together, even if it's quarterly, even if it's just once in a while, in a way that helps us go back into our environments, in a way that reinvigorates work, that helps accelerate those outcomes and helps to really build our team. Because to the point you made, there can be legacy people and they have values, but we want to make sure that the people who are just coming on board also get exposure to that and experience with that, and make sure that they're part of networks. Because what the research has shown is that over this pandemic, the direct networks have stayed tightly coupled, right? You continue to talk to the people that you were always talking to. Microsoft just did a research on this. But those indirect networks, those people that you may have just run into in the hallway, they weren't really on your team, but you had a relationship with, those are the ones that have started to settle, right? And we haven't really been able to stoke the fire of those indirect networks as much. So being on site brings us together, it helps the culture, and can help unite us as a team behind the mission of the organization.
Well, you said something that I'm going to challenge, I
Okay.
guess. Not take exception to it, challenge. And I'm probably taking it even out of context a little bit. But you said go back, in terms of moving back to the way we did things, or back to the way things were done, so that everybody's comfortable. And I would say, our context here is a future of work.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so a lot of people look at work and the workplace, and right now they look at the back to the office versus remote almost as a tidal environment. Um, Tides ebb and flow, and economies ebb and flow. And so we're all used to that sort of thing. And I rather think of it's more like the old saying that it's more like a river.
Mm-hmm.
There's a continuous flow forward. And as they say, that a person who stands in a river never feels the same water twice.
Right, I've heard that.
So it's not an ebb and flow, it's a continuous movement forward,
Mm-hmm.
all. So as we seek talent for all of our businesses, as we bring these cultures together, how do we make sure that we're on a river instead of going back and forth? Because the ocean never moves; it just goes back and forth, back and forth, back and forth.
Right.
Unless you're in Florida right now, in which case it's moving.
Oh, yes.
But it's an ebb and flow versus a river, which is constantly moving.
Right.
And we need our future of work concepts to be more like the river.
Right.
So I don't know if that's even a question that I've asked as much as a statement, but how would you address something like that?
I mean, I agree. I feel like the statement of return to work is a bit flawed. And the idea of return, we've been working the whole time.
Yeah, exactly.
But returning to the office is really what we want to think about. And we don't want to go back. We want to return to the office, but we need it to be supportive of the way that we need to work in today's environment. which is different than it was in the past. And it's a bit more flexible, right, than it was in the past. And it has to take into consideration, again, that people may be, like you said, travelers and coming in and out, in this dynamicness of the office place, so that they can really capture that fluidity, right? That people aren't going to be stagnant and doing the same thing Monday through Friday, but it's going to change throughout the week. And how can the office really be set up in a way that's adaptable to support the needs of the team now and into the future?
As we look towards it, I wonder, when we talk about all these things, whether the physical workspace is enough.
Mm-hmm.
Culture certainly is a critical part of how we design the space and how we use the space, and really how talent is attracted and kept overall. But as we move back to the office, I'll use that as a negative term, to the people that are working remotely today, a lot of which are saying, no, I'm not going back. We see an awful lot of that movement going on, and I think rightfully so in many cases. It's just not necessary. The costs of returning to the office to the employee are huge. The cost to returning to the company, of the employees return to the company, it actually reduces their cost somewhat, or allows them to justify a fixed asset, which they may or may not actually even need. So do you see the core corporate structure physically, the built environment on behalf of companies, shrinking or growing in the future physically, more or less square footage?
That's been a good big riddle for a lot of our clients to grapple with and figure out what they're going to do with the real estate. And I think a lot of it is starting to dig into the why. What does your office represent in the future? And being able to clearly communicate that to your employees. Because as you said, and was part of our survey too, there was a lot of people who had a lot of different factors of reasons of why they maybe wanted or did not want to come back into the office, right? And they've said, we've been here for a couple of years, why come back? So for an office, for an organization to be able to clearly express, this is the importance, this is why the function of the office in our business, and then being able to diagnose how to set the office up to then function to support that why, right? Because the office of yesterday may not support the office of tomorrow and the needs of tomorrow, right? The team of tomorrow. So how can we repurpose? And if we're doing things, we might not get it right, but we talk to a lot of clients about piloting and experimenting, right? Let's just start trying something. And as we do, we'll learn and we'll gain more information. And every client is different. There's no one solution or one size fits all that's going to be a panacea for everybody. But if we start learning a bit about what's working with our organization and get feedback, people are invested, they care. When we do surveys, and we did this before the pandemic and even after, we have huge response rates and people care about the office. So they're invested in it and they'll give you their feedback. You'll learn as soon as they start working in these environments, what starts to work, what doesn't, what rises to the surface. We did that with our own office, and we're starting to refine as we build our new headquarters that's coming next year, what's going to really ultimately be the right space for us. So I think a lot of it is just starting to play, starting to experiment and discover, and describing what that why is, learning from your employees why they're coming back in, what they need in the office, and then thinking about the programming to really ultimately determine, to your point, are we shrinking? Are we growing? Are we staying the same size? That's really dependent on what you need to do with your office and what your team ultimately needs to do with space.
Well, your design decisions and the applications of your design decision, an awful lot of it are done based on data from your surveys. And I think that's something that's not necessarily new, but it's something that's not a well-disciplined practice by many others. Is I really like this or I really like that.
Right.
Your why question, why do you like that? And are you going to like it next year?
Mhm.
The built environment is expensive to build, expensive to tear down, and it's even the most expensive when it's not being used
100%.
overall. Well, sir, we're running out of time, and I apologize because we could probably do this for the
No,
next 2 hours. Uh,
agreed.
love to have you back again sometime and really explore some of the devil in the detail on these things. But I guess we can say that data-driven decision making around the why for design is one of the most important things that people can be paying attention to today. Whether they look at them like I do as travelers, or
Mhm.
like some of your clients maybe as occupiers, or halfway in between. So I really want to thank you very much. We're very grateful for your time and your expertise, and I look forward to chatting again.
Thank you so much. It was wonderful. Thank you for having me.